All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 5 of Upwardly Mobile. Is it impossible, really impossible, actually, to find a job right now? This is a topic that I've been seeing a lot in my jobs community. We've been seeing a lot in the economy right now, too. And also, CNBC came out with a video earlier this week or late last week that had that same question. Why is it so hard to find a job right now? And among some of their things that they highlighted in that video included a cooling labor market, which is correct. There are fewer openings than there have been before. Um, Good job opportunities are not as much anymore, and really just the high number of layoffs and the increased number of competition. So, right now, I guess, 'cause we're recording this on Super Bowl Sunday, if you were to look for the reference point there, you'd say that being able to find a job is kind of like throwing a pass into triple or double coverage right now. You have triple and double the competition, and you have to really say the right things or just be a really, really solid fit to get hired. And so those are some interesting points. And then, I think the other thing that CNBC wrote out was there are high expectations from job seekers. And we've been talking about this a little bit on Albert's List lately, especially in the webinars that we've done. You can check out the webinars on how to find a job in 2024 and the other one on how to systematize your job search in 2024. Both are really important and both make a really important distinction in this job market, which is if you take a great resignation mindset into a return to office world, your job search is going to be tough. So I know, if you remember correctly, the great resignation was a time where everybody was leaving their employers because they were finding better opportunities. The pay was better. They could tell their employers to take that job and shove it. Um, Among so many other things ongoing. You would get multiple offers. The salaries would be much higher. I think I might have mentioned that already. And now that we're in this much, much tighter job market where jobs are fewer and you might have to take a pay cut and you might have to contend with going back to the office. It's becoming a lot rougher. And in that moment, it's important, I think, to really look, whether you need that job really badly or whether you are able to wait for a little bit longer because you have savings, which is another thing, right? Um, the government has reported that savings have gone down significantly, and so that's one more other thing to note. But going back into what really I think makes it harder to find that job is also just the fact that there's a lot of fake jobs out there too. We spoke about that today on the Albert's List community. You'll see the link in the podcast show notes here before, is that a lot of companies are just posting job listings because they want to acquire the information of interested parties, whether they're actually hiring or not. And this might come back to the fact that for a lot of these job search sites, it's, a couple $100 to post a job listing. And when you have millions and millions of dollars that your company is making per year, $100 or so here is just a drop in the bucket. And so that's the other thing. And then I would say the final thing of why the job market is so tough is because a lot of people simply don't have the job search skills out there. And right, this is not going to be a surprise coming from somebody who runs a job search organization. But this tends to be the case. I look at lots and lots of resumes. I look at lots of people's job searches. And, we have our boot camp starting tomorrow, our winter 2024 boot camp. And, starting from the resume through the interview process, through the positioning and personal branding process, it's tough, right? It's a lot of different things to keep in mind as people look through their job searches and see what it is that they actually need to do. And a lot of them don't do it well. And so, just to keep it really like brief in some sense here, because we could talk about it at a later time, is that Resumes are a really, really prime example. A lot of people go into their job searches writing resumes that mimic job descriptions. They don't write a lot of resumes that talk about the impact that they made at the company. And when you consider that we live in a world where writing the right resume means that you are talking about how you will be the best candidate out there, and most people are focusing on just writing about job descriptions, it really it really loses you out because those who know how they impact within the organizations that they're going to join are going to be the ones who eventually went out in that realm. And so I think that if people learn how to make several small tweaks to their job search, whether it's writing a better resume, knowing their interview answers, branding themselves correctly online, then it makes a gigantic, gigantic difference. And so that's the first point, I think, about why it's so hard to find a job. And it's a lot in contrast, which leads me to my second point that I wanted to talk about today, which is the state of the job market as it relates to the general health of the economy, which is always a fascinating thing to look at. One of the things that anyone, if you've noticed and you watch your 401k and you watch how things are going with your money, the S&P 500 just hit 5,000 points for the very first time this last week. And the broader stock market continues to surge. Companies like Nvidia are all-time highs. Bitcoin is coming to its next halving, which happens in less than 70 days. And Tuesday's consumer price index is supposed to show that inflation only rose 2.9% in the past year. All of which are really rosy numbers if you think about it, considering where we've been over the last couple of years. Yet, we're continuing to see a lot of, I would say, potential weakness in the job market because the Fed continues to want to hit its 2% inflation target, which which is, for a lot of folks, a long way off. Even though many who are in the industry and follow these interest rates expect that interest rates will start going down by about May or June this year. They may not go down for a lot longer, which, I think is a concern for many as folks think through it. But the other thing that we have to think about too is that, Chairman Powell will probably stand up there and continue to tell us that the economy will do well and is still doing well, even if there are many people who are unemployed or many people who aren't spending money or are applying to fake jobs and really struggling through it. They're only going to care when something breaks. And by something breaks, it means that you have more bank failures. You have a major bedrock of the economy in retail starting to lay off because people are spending less money. All of that revenge spending starts to end, and you have massive layoffs that take all sectors of the economy, from what in tech all the way into retail, into housing, and so forth. And all of a sudden, you just have a bloodbath where inflation doesn't just stop rising, it actually goes into deflationary mode, which I mean, some people may want because that means your costs return to somewhere lower. And so, what will it actually take for the economy to actually start growing again is an interesting piece. I think it's more interest in investment, right? Investment is always key because people want to throw their money into new ideas. They want to invest in people, and risk taking will increase as well when that type of investment happens. And that only happens when rates are low. And so when rates do get lower, I think those things will happen. As they stay high, I think we're going to see more of the same. You may continue to see really great numbers out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but then you may also realize, what do those numbers really mean? We talked about this last week where we wondered whether these job numbers were actually real or not, and whether anyone should actually believe them. And I think the last piece of hope is that you see that it's an election year, and you're hoping that maybe you get to a point where the president realizes that he wants to be reelected, and then sends out a really nicely, carefully worded message to the head of the Federal Reserve, and then we start to see things happen. Um, and so yeah, that's I think is the major topic that I wanted to talk about this week, why it's so hard to find a job, even despite where the economy is and what it'll take for things to actually look better. I would say the other thing I wanted to talk about today, the second topic, is a topic that's been on my mind and that we're talking about in one of our webinars next week, and is that whether it is time to leave tech, right? I think one of the things that's been extended upon everything here as we talk about layoffs and this economic transition is that tech has led the layoff train with over 400,000 layoffs since the beginning of 2022. It has not been great. It has been chaotic in its own way. And it's been something that I think a lot of people in very specific regions have suffered a lot from, especially notably Silicon Valley, New York, Austin, etc. And, it's really interesting when you think about the job market as it relates to the tech industry, because number one, the industry loves to cannibalize itself. Um, Tech has been known for a long time as the industry where you get a ton of of investment, and you get a ton of interest in it because salaries are high, and you're looking towards the future of what's being developed. Right now, it's AI. Half a decade ago, it was cloud. Half a decade before that, it was social networking. Half a decade before that, which we were going back 15 years, it was the explosion of mobile and the rise of the iPhone and all of those things. And so, if you've been on that carousel, it's been a very, very exciting ride for you so far. But it's also an unstable place because when companies don't make their sales, when companies don't get their funding, when companies see interest rates rise, investing in these things becomes a lot more expensive, and it's a lot harder to compete when you don't have those immediate expenses that you can take care of. And, the first thing that happens in those cases, if you're not a business leader, if you're somebody who works as an employee, is that you get hurt with layoffs. And so you go through things like the dot-com bust. You go through things like whatever you're going to call this current layoff trajectory, whatever it may be. And so, also in addition to that, the tech world also seems to be in its own bubble. And, look, I work in tech. I have been here for the last 14 years or so, in various capacities, particularly in marketing. So you could say maybe I'm a problem of this, but I also am well aware in trying to tell people what goes on in this industry from time to time. And so Silicon Valley exists in its own bubble of ideas. Silicon Valley has its own beliefs around what it wants to do when it comes to creating technology, when it wants to think that something should be a big, big deal, right? So if you remember just a couple years ago, it was blockchain is the future. Now it's AI is the future. Cloud was the future 10 years ago. And I think one of those things is once you get out of Silicon Valley, you realize that all of these things are gigantic big deals. But you also realize in the same vein that they are only big deals if you think they're a big deal because you hang out in the circle that calls them a big deal. I think that a lot of people around the world may love the idea of cloud computing if they know that there's a practical application to it. And so, knowing how hyped it might be there, there's those gold rushes, and then there's those collapses. And so, that doesn't mean that necessarily it's that tech is dead. It's just that if you like the stability, then you may want to consider something else. And, we have a webinar coming up around this, which I'll also share in the podcast link below here, around a panel that we're doing on the 21st, where we're bringing together a librarian. We're going to bring together a teacher, a construction worker, and then a lawyer to talk about what their fields look like and how they may be impacted by tech, but also may be more stable than working in tech. And so, those are some interesting ideas to consider, and I highly encourage you to RSVP for those. Some other topics of interest before I conclude today, as I think through this. There were a couple of headlines that caught my eye over this week as I read the news. Number one was Australia is considering a right to disconnect law. A right to disconnect law is a compelling piece of legislation because, if passed, and I think in its ideal form, It would find companies that reach out to employees after work hours in unnecessary circumstances. And so this is one of those things along the lines of work-life balance trends. You have people like me who are working on a Sunday here. It is the Super Bowl as I type this, so I hope that I actually share this out later and more folks can take a look and take a gander at it, but also more so whether people should be allowed to reach you after hours or not. And France and Spain have had these kinds of laws on the books for a while. France has found it tough to enforce it because it's been so ambiguous. So depending on where the Australian law goes, it may have weight, it may not have weight. But as the young ones like to say, watch this space. Another one that really caught my eye this week was that Sam Altman, the founder and CEO and returning CEO of OpenAI, said that he was looking for $7 trillion in funding for AI chips so that AI could keep going, right? And so, as you know, in order for AI to work, you need large language models that are chock full of data that cover whatever it is that you want to see. And then you have the chips that support the large language models and their processing so that you can come out with the right answer when you say put in a request to write a poem or et cetera through ChatGPT. And so this is Sam Altman's latest moonshot. If you look at the global economy, it's worth about 70 trillion right now. And so the fact that he wants about 1%, 10% of it, just for AI chips just tells you how big of a ask that this is. And so, in some sense, this is also the only way for AI to become something at scale, because if you consider that uh, a chip shortage is stopping us from getting to a point where AI can do all of our jobs. And this is the one thing, a lot of money and a lot of chip production, then you're definitely going to get at something there where, that might be the next frontier. And so watch that space as well and see where it's going in the next couple of months. The third one that's really interesting is very California centric. One thing that I think people think about a lot is um, unionizing. We saw a lot of that last year with actors going on strike, with UPS workers winning big deals, with auto workers getting their flowers, and so on and so forth, right? And so, in this time when we've seen a lot of companies boast about their profits and workers fighting back, workers in California are under the microscope, especially those fast food workers, as we get into this $20 minimum wage that is set to go into effect on April the 1st. And so, if you've been watching this for a while, you know that fast food is incredibly expensive now in California. $18 combo meals, $15 Happy Meals, all things that you never thought were fast food because you go to a fast food joint and you would notice that your hamburger and your shake was like a $5 thing and you can get out with it. But no, going to McDonald's is like eating at a fancy restaurant right now. And I know this because you go out on a date, you go eat with your significant other, and it's $50 for two. And fast food is now $20 for two. And so as they say, as if you raise the price of labor, then everything else will go up. And so it's getting to a point where, I remember when I first started in work 15 years ago, I was making 16 bucks an hour. And now a fast food worker makes more than I was making coming out of school. And so you could call it wage inflation, you could call it just the new way that things are. But it'll be very interesting to see the impacts of this. And I think, the expected impact is that a rise in minimum wage means that your average McDonald's worker will be taking 40 grand a year home every time. But also your favorite McDonald's meal may end up costing $25 all the same, which may make you consider whether you actually want to go for a McDonald's meal or whether you want to go and do something else. So those are some of the interesting thoughts and interesting things that I've been watching this week. We'll be back next week for more insights and takes on the job market as we talk about upwardly mobile topics. In the meantime, we also have a couple of events coming up. Tomorrow starts our job search boot camp for winter 2024. So if that's something that you're interested in, please join us. There's a cover charge for it, as we are always looking to expand and increase our ways of impacting job seekers. And then the following week, we have three events, and we'll talk about those next week too. We have our monthly job search and inflation report update. And then we have that followed up by our panel where we're talking about the future of work, and then following that up with how to adjust in the modern job market. And so those are all going to be very topical elements that you're going to see. I'm going to probably cite back to them too because I think they also have a lot to highlight. But until then, we watch for the CPI report this week. We look for more jobs report insights. We look at how the economy evolves, and we'll be back next week for more. Thanks so much for listening, and we will be back soon.